Hi. Okay, everybody, it is time. Welcome to PUC Career Combos, Science Careers, Non-Medical. We say non-medical, we had a medical career convo last week. So just want to distinguish between the two for interested students so they know what they're walking into. We are a team of two in terms of these webinars. We've got myself, I'm Nicole Murphy, Director of School and College Counseling. And for those of you that don't see me at the PUC schools, it's because I work out of the home office. It is my job to serve our awesome PUC school and college counseling team at the high schools, as well as school leaders, to make sure that you guys have what you need as it relates to career, academic, and personal social. I've got my trusted friend and colleague, Amy Villasenor. Please introduce yourself, Amy.
Yeah, hi, good evening, afternoon, everybody. My name is Amy Villasenor, and I'm the PUC Alumni Program Coordinator. So I facilitate our seniors transition from high school to their life beyond. We like to support our alumni on all post-secondary pathways. So that's why we invited them here today. I think it's great for our students to hear about all different types of career pathways and things to consider after high school.
Excellent, thank you. Virtual housekeeping. I feel like everybody's a Zoom expert by now, but I like to just bring it up. I have it so that when you enter the Zoom, you are on mute. We ask that you stay muted until we have a time where we ask you to unmute if you'd like to speak, but just so that it's not distracting and that we don't interrupt any of our expert presenters, please keep muted. Ask questions. We put these webinars on solely for you. So as you think of questions, put them in the chat, and Ms. Amy Villasenor will be going through all of them and then be able to present them at the end, or she might interject sometime during the presentation where it makes sense. And then towards the end of the presentation, we're going to have a survey link in the chat. And we ask that you complete it because we read every single response. So give us your feedback, what you love, what you wish we would do, how we can improve, as well as this information shared with your high school so that if you're supposed to get extra credit or attendance points, they will know. Your high school will know. They'll take attendance through the survey. So with all of that being said, I say we jump on in. We've got an awesome expert panel today. We've got Dr. David Rizzo, professor at UC Davis. Thank you for being here. And also Dr. Jennifer Andrews. She's the staff seismologist at Caltech. Thank you both for being here. After a long day of work, you still made time for PUC school students, and it's greatly appreciated. We're very, very thankful for the time. Okay, I'm tired of hearing myself talk, and I want to hear them and y'all, but I just want to go over it. The one reason why we put these PUC career convos is to make sure that you as students have a wide range of knowledge about different careers. You need to know what you love, what you don't love, and all the options out there. Most students pick careers just based on what their parents do, or a friend's mom does, a local neighbor, or maybe a TV show or movie that they see. We want to make sure that you are informed consumers. And we've got professionals who are living, breathing, doing the real work out there that can speak to it. So take advantage of having them here and ask questions. We want to make sure that you are empowered to make informed decisions. So with all that being said, I think it's really important that every time we have presenters, like they don't ever really think like, you guys were once kids, you guys were once in high school, and you didn't come out just accomplished like this and end up and knew what you were going to be. So I'm going to ask to maybe we'll start with Dr. Andrews first here. If you could just give some key events in your life from when you were a high school age student. We may have 6th through 12th graders on this call, PUC alumni, parents, maybe some staff, but what are some key experiences that helped you figure out what you wanted to be when you grew up, as well as key experience that helped you get to where you are today?
Sure, I can start off. I actually, I didn't know. I think that's one of the important things to say first. It wasn't like I, woke up at 5 years old and was like, right, seismology, that's the path I want. It was something that you come to through lots of different experiences, through lots of people that just put you onto the right pathway as you go along. So definitely I was always interested in science through high school. I really enjoyed my science subjects, physics, chemistry, maths, and I loved problem solving. And that's one of the key things that I think takes you into a science career, is enjoying figuring things out and working out how to make things work. A lot of my job as a seismologist is actually kind of like engineering, it's making things work. So definitely as a school student, it was about enjoying science. And another key thing with being a seismologist or any kind of earth science career path is enjoying the outdoors, enjoying the world around you, trying to figure out, you know, the rocks that you see when you're out on a hike out in the mountains, why are they there? Where did they come from? So those are two sort of key interests that led me on my pathway. And then I actually changed directions. So when I started university, because I was in England, I was doing a sort of more general science career, a more general science degree. And I realized that I wanted something that was very broad, something that covered being able to go out into the field and have fieldwork experiences, being able to look at rocks in the laboratory, as well as being, you know, doing math and working with computers. And so that's why earth science for me was a really interesting subject, because it has a very broad and very applicable, you know, to the real world, to the world around me kind of path. So yeah, those are some of the key things while I was in education. And then I've had a number of different jobs, both in the commercial setting as well as closer to university and research, and being able to move around that has helped me sort of hone in. I really enjoy with my current career that I am doing something that's publicly applicable. We're looking at the earthquakes that affect our entire community and the community around me every day. So having that sort of feedback and that really sort of, yeah, applied role really suits me. So those are some of my answers. I'll turn it over to Dr. Rizzo.
Okay, well, I could probably just say whatever Jen said, except with plants, almost word for word. So I'm a plant pathologist. And if you don't know what that is, basically, I'm a plant doctor. So here at UC Davis, we have a med school, we have a veterinary school, and my department that I work in is plant pathology, and we work on diseases of plants. And that includes agricultural plants, as well as primarily what I work on are diseases of forest trees. And so my story from along those lines is I was always interested in biology, collecting bugs, collecting fish, having all sorts of things. And what really got me into working on diseases of forest trees is I went to college at a small state school in Virginia in the Shenandoah Valley. And I used to backpack the Appalachian Trail. And I had never really thought of plants. I was more interested in fish and reptiles and stuff. But hiking the Appalachian Trail, we saw these massive stumps of what are known as chestnut trees. Now, those of you in California, if you saw these stumps, you'd think they were redwoods. These were gigantic trees, except in the early 1980s when I was in college, you never saw a chestnut tree that was more than about 3 or 4 inches in diameter. That's because a disease, now known as chestnut blight, was introduced from another part of the world into the eastern United States in the late 1800s and killed every large chestnut tree in the eastern United States. So it basically reduced the largest tree in the eastern United States to a shrub. Yet here I'm backpacking and I'm seeing these big forests, because the forests didn't disappear, they just changed. And to me, that was amazing that a disease could change the forest, and that the forest that I was hiking in the late 70s, early 80s was very different than what my grandfather would be hiking in the early 1900s. And so that is sort of where I got into working on diseases and ecology all at the same time. So that was kind of a big shift for me. The other part is then after graduating with a bachelor's in just general biology, I went on to get a master's degree in botany and plant pathology. And then I was applying for PhD programs, and it kind of struck me that I'd be 27 years old with a PhD, and I had absolutely no clue what I was going to do with a PhD. So I withdrew my application and spent most of my 20s working for the Forest Service and working for other researchers climbing mountains. And I did not go back to get a PhD to become a professor until I was in my 30s. And that point, as a PhD student, I discovered I actually liked teaching because I was teaching to pay the bills. And so that was another major shift. So when I have students, and I teach a lot of students here at UC Davis, come to me and say, I have no idea what I want to do. I would tell them, if you had told me when I was almost 35 that I'd be doing what I'm doing now, I would have laughed. So I did a lot of these kind of things, just much like Dr. Andrews said, that it's rare that you have a nice straight line. You're muted, Nicole.
You're muted.
Thank you. I got excited. Out of all the sciences in the world, it's always fascinating how everyone finds their niche, right? I mean, careers in general, but especially when I think of sciences, there's so many different directions to go in. So thank you for sharing your stories. Whenever we do these webinars, people say one of the most important things that they hear is hearing that people didn't know what they wanted to be, because some kids feel such pressure to feel like I have to know what I want to be right now and pick my major or understand the meaning of life and what my purpose is right now. So thank you for sharing your stories and how you got to where you are. The next thing that I'd like you to share is for you to paint a picture of what your day looks like. And I ask you, you guys are very accomplished at the level you are. What would it look like, or what did it look like for you or for someone at their beginning stages of their career with your degree or in your position, as opposed to, tell us what it's like in your world today. And maybe we'll just flip-flop, and this time you can go first, Dr. Rizzo. Please.
Yeah, well, so when you look at somebody who's starting out in my field, and I think of the people who work in my lab here at UC Davis, I have graduate students, I have research technicians, who are mostly people who just got a bachelor's degree in biology or some related field, and their day is really varied. And I think that's the fun part, is why I went into this sort of area, because every day is different. It could be that they're out doing field work. And I have people in a lot of different projects. We do a lot of work in the mountains, in the coast. I have people working down in Big Sur, climbing mountains. They'll collect samples, bring them back to the lab. They analyze samples. And then there's stuff that is kind of, you may consider it a little on the boring side. A lot of science is not just these eureka moments every day. So there's a lot of data entry, data analysis. And then the other thing that I try to get the people who work in my lab to do is to do a lot of reading and writing. So read the scientific literature. No science occurs in a vacuum. So you want to see what other people in related fields or very similar fields at different places are doing. So that, I think, is, the early stages. You're doing all of these different things. And I think the other key thing to think about, and sometimes this happens as when you're doing science in high school or younger than that, even in college, that science is not cookbook. And there is a lot of creativity that goes into science, just like going into the arts. And so coming up with a cool experiment takes a lot of creativity. And you spend a good part of your day trying to come up with those cool ideas. That's where the reading comes in, and how you can apply that to what your questions, asking questions, and then coming up with ways to answer them.
With your expertise, does your specialty of being a plant doctor ever bring you outside of the university to do work?
That's a great question. And, so we do a lot of our research, but particularly, and this gets back to what Dr. Andrews said, the practical part. And this is why I went into plant pathology, working with diseases, is we have a lot of interface with the general public, people calling up, their trees are dying. Right now, I work with a disease that's all up and down the coast of California in different forest areas, but I also work with almond farmers, prune farmers, people work in vineyards. So we do a lot of disease diagnosis, almost the same thing that a doctor or a vet would do, except plants can't talk back to you and tell you where it hurts. But other than that, we do that same sort of thing. So I give a lot of talks to community groups, master gardeners, citizen groups. And so, yeah, that's another part I love about my job. And I've done more of that as I've moved up as well.
Very cool. Thank you very much. And Dr. Andrews?
Sure. So I wanted to give a taste of some of the different aspects of my job because, as Dr. Rizzo said, it can change very much day to day. There is a lot of working on my own, just in my office independently, looking at a lot of data and writing a lot. I write a lot of computer code. So I actually work for the Earthquake Early Warning Project. You may have heard of that. That's been rolling out across the West Coast. And so I write a lot of algorithms for that. So there's a lot of testing of that and collaborating with colleagues. So that's the other side of it. So it does get very team oriented. I work with people around the world. Right now, it's a lot of West Coast universities who work together, but also colleagues in Europe. And so we're talking to each other. As Dr. Rizzo said, we're trying to, find these solutions, come up with new ways to solve the problems that we're dealing with. So it can be both, some time alone, but also working with colleagues. Of course, one of the big changes for us is when there is a big earthquake. So if we take an event like 2019 in Ridgecrest, we move into this emergency mode. We have lots of press contact. We're doing a lot of outreach to the public. We're trying to make information available as rapidly as possible as to what's happening during an earthquake sequence, what people can expect, trying to reassure the public that, we have an idea of what's going on. We can tell them to the best of our knowledge what they can expect in the days to come. So that sort of public outreach side is really important to us as well, to be able to share that information. I don't get to go out into the field, but for someone who works in the seismology sector, that could be a really big part of it. In some of my early jobs, I worked adjacent to the oil and gas industry. And so for an early career seismologist, you might be out, working shift work, working through the night, monitoring jobs that are going on in the field, providing feedback to engineers and operators. So it can be a really sort of high energy environment of providing that immediate feedback to influence these operations. And you get to go to some really amazing places. So in one of my first jobs, I was traveling to Malaysia, over here to the US from Europe. I was spending time in Germany. I spent time in China, all these different places, especially with a field like earth sciences and geosciences. It really can take you around the world to do field work. And then of course, I have friends who also work in the laboratory side of seismology as well. So they might be working with microscopes on a day-to-day level. And yes, doing a lot of sort of very routine data entry, data analysis kind of tasks. But if that's where your interest lies, it's obviously a very exciting activity to be doing. And again, yeah, lots of reading, lots of writing of reports, the same thing as I think every scientific field will have that.
I have a question. When it comes to being a seismologist at Caltech, I mean, I'm not well versed in your field at all, but I mean, that's kind of the place to be, what I know of in terms of seismology. Are you one of how many seismologists there?
So we're an interesting setup in the sense that Caltech has a world-leading research facility for seismology, and they're doing everything from studying the very heart interior of the earth and how it works to some of the groundbreaking technologies for measuring out in the field. And that is, they're teaching and they're carrying out fundamental research. But my role is actually that we are running this real-time system in collaboration with colleagues at the United States Geological Survey and providing this service to the community which is very much operational, and it's quite unusual to see that split across a university and a government agency. So I work with a team of analysts who are looking at the data all the time. I work with professors who are trying to bring in, new methods of looking at this data into our regular processing. And then, of course, yes, we have the Earthquake Early Warning Project, which is another sort of, very collaborative side. We have the field of, the team of field engineers, who are a team of sort of 15 people who go out into the field. So our team is around 30 people, and that's just for running the network. That is seismologists, that's people who keep our infrastructure running, that's people going out into the field, and that's other seismologists as well.
Thank you. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. Well, excellent. Well, when it comes to advice, if you have some students on this call, this was put out to our students and kids that were able to attend, or families that were able to attend, that are interested in sciences in general. What advice do you have for students who are in middle school, high school, that like science and are thinking of what science should I go into?
I would say my initial thoughts are it's really a repetition of things we've said before, but don't feel like you have to make the decisions early. Keep exploring what you enjoy. For me, it was very much, very charismatic teachers pointed me in new directions I'd never even thought of as I went through. And so keep open to just exploring what you're enjoying and what you're doing. Yeah, and picking up those skills that are transferable. So I see you've got important skills on the list, and really computational skills are becoming increasingly important. We're starting to use technology similar to the ones that Google uses. So if you look at things like deep learning, Google search engines, things like that, we're starting to use those in our sciences. We're starting to use cloud computing in our sciences. So picking up those kinds of skills that you could take to any niche area is also really, really helpful.
Yeah, I was surprised. I don't know why, but I was surprised when you were talking about how you had to code. And then I think of I have the app on my phone for early alert and just that aspect of it. And we've had a webinar with IT, and they were just talking about different aspects of the, IT industry and how it pretty much goes into every single field. So very, very interesting. I appreciate that. In terms of advice too, I always ask the question, when you are looking for candidates to hire, what type of qualities or skills do you look for?
So for me, it's very important that people obviously are passionate about what they're doing. I like to see a lot of enthusiasm. I like to see a lot of creativity in what they're doing. I also like to see a lot of independent thought. That problem solving, that enjoying taking on a problem and really rooting down to the heart of it, because it means that they can really work independently and creatively and come up with new solutions. So those are some of the things that I'm looking for in candidates. I'll let Dr. Rizzo take over. I feel like I've spoken a little long now.
No.
You're perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Now, all that stuff is, it's pretty much the same for everything that I was going to say. I 100% agree. At this stage, the sky's the limit. And I've worked with thousands of undergraduate students in my 25 years at UC Davis, and I don't know how many of them have completely changed. I want to go into medicine, and they end up working on plants. Oftentimes, as Dr. Andrew said, it's a certain class inspires you, a summer job. So at this stage of your career, don't try to be, this is what I'm going to do, because it could change. I said I was going to be a fisheries biologist when I was a freshman and ended up working on forest trees. And so keep an open mind. But there are certain skills that I've seen over the years, Dr. Andrew said, that are transferable, and I've worked with many, many employers. A lot, students coming out of college are expected to know stuff. So it's things such as oral communication, written communication, teamwork. Dr. Andrews said enthusiasm, a zest for learning new things, because as you move through your career, you're not always going to be able to take classes to learn new stuff. You just got to learn it. I mean, I graduated a long time ago, and many techniques have been invented since then. And I didn't take a class. I just had to learn these things. And some of you have taken biotechnology classes. I'm old enough that PCR was invented after I graduated from graduate school, not even undergraduate. And so those are kind of key things. And incorporate that kind of things into your classes. Very few of us are born to be great speakers and great writers. And you become good at that by practicing. And one way of practicing, and you're probably not going to like me for saying this, is to take some of those assignments that you get, writing term papers, giving presentations, as career preparation. That's your practice. And I tell this to my students, giving a presentation in class, that's your time to mess up, not when you're giving a presentation for a job interview. And so see all of those things as your practice. And it can make some of those really boring term papers and other assignments, it adds something to them, because it's a really, really important skill. And I think in sciences, Dr. Andrews said, quantitative stuff is really important. Understanding, that's a skill. Coding, it cuts across everything these days.
Nicole?
Yeah.
Something I was thinking about that Dr. Andrews and Dr. Rizzo have been talking about, they've kind of talked about the importance of oral communication. Something that reminded me of when I was in college, I was in charge of a couple research journals. And I know a big part of being in academics is being able to advocate for yourself and your research, and being able to market what it is you're studying, whether casually or more formally, to your colleagues and then to your peers in the discipline. I was wondering if either of you could talk a little bit more about that, because I think sometimes we think like networking is just for cocktail hour or something that happens in the hotel lobby, but it's something that happens in every discipline, not just like in big business.
Yeah, writing and scientific articles, that's sort of the currency of science. I mean, you could do all the work in the lab, but if you don't tell anybody, especially if you're doing something that's practical, and I think that's one thing of getting that out. But I do think, advocacy for yourself, finding good mentors to help you with that. And I think Dr. Andrews could probably address this way better than me, but I think that's especially important for women in science, historically. And I think, these days in biology, probably 80% of all undergraduate biology majors are women. But I think in a field like seismology, it's probably still the opposite. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. And I'll let Dr. Andrews hit that topic, because I think it's really an important one.
Yeah, interestingly, as a woman in science, earth science is about 50-50, and it's not what you would expect, right? I mean, you think about people going and looking at rocks, and it's not necessarily obvious, but yeah, we were almost 50-50. And yet I'd come from physics where we were certainly a minority. We were only sort of 10 to 20%. And so it was important, but I had some great female mentors. And that was really important to me. They were early career scientists, and they were very proactive in supporting those around them. And as a woman in science, I think it is so important to support your community, support your network, help, extend help and advice to the women around you and who are coming up behind you. Because yeah, we still have some work to do. And there's a lot of conversations still going on at Caltech about subjects like that. I think speaking to the more general question about advocating, building a network, building a community is very important across all of the sciences. Attending conferences, developing those collaborations that can lead to new creativity, new ideas, new directions for your research. All of that is really important. It's not something I work with a lot because I'm not strictly in the academic world. What's actually really interesting in my career is the outreach side, being able to communicate your science to a broader audience. We have school tours come through the Caltech Seismolab, being able to share with those school students your enthusiasm for the subject, why it's relevant to their lives, why you're passionate that we need to understand more in this. And then, of course, communicating at times of crisis. So in that high pressure environment of we've had what could be a human catastrophe. So for something like earthquakes, we deal with pretty devastating events. We may have had loss of life, we've had loss of property, and being able to communicate well at that time is important. So as Dr. Rizzo said, take any opportunity you can to explain your science, to learn to communicate well, to consider different audiences when you're communicating your subject. All of that becomes very useful.
I think also, thank you for that question, Amy, and thank you both Dr. Andrews and Dr. Rizzo for your answers in response to that. One thing that many PUC students will be the first in their families to go to college. So when we talk about finding a mentor, when we talk about networking, as a freshman going to a 2-year or a 4-year college university, what are network opportunities? What do you recommend for these students that will be the first to do this?
Well, for me, and I give talks to freshmen every year, and particularly for first generation students, I'm involved in a lot of programs. Key thing is go to office hours of the faculty in your class. I can't stress that enough. And go, even if you don't have questions about the material, just go to get to know them. And most faculty just love talking about themselves. Just ask them about what they teach, what their research are, and you can learn a lot, and they get to know you. And as you move forward, and this is where you can get letters of recommendation for summer jobs, for graduate school, for professional schools, for jobs at the end. Get to know somebody, and the easiest way is through going to office hours. Another way of networking are clubs, and most places have all sorts of really cool science clubs that will bring in guest speakers. I give them dozens of these talks to our student clubs, and that's another way that you can easily network without a lot of effort, is to just go to clubs. And I really can't stress the office hours part enough. I write dozens and dozens of reference letters every year, but I also get the occasional email. I used to teach introductory biology, 700 students, and I would get an email and say, well, I took your class, Dr. Rizzo. You were my favorite professor. I sat in row 43, kind of off to the left, and you don't know who I am, but can you write me a reference letter? You don't get a very good reference letter in that case. So go to office hours, get to know your professors, get to know your TAs, the teaching assistants who are graduate students. And those are times that you can just really learn a lot and get a mentor, even as a freshman. In fact, it's probably even more important as a freshman.
Thank you very much. One thing I want to just add, and forgive me, students, if you know what this is already, but I just want to go over it just in case there's someone out there who doesn't. Office hours is when you're in college, your professor or instructor gives you dates and times. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 3 to 5. They give you like a range of times of, this is when you can come to me if you have questions, if you want to know what I eat for lunch or whatever it might be, but to get to know them. I always stress to students and many of the PUC school and college counselors is get to know people before you're in crisis. It's one thing to say, hi, Professor, hi, Dr. Rizzo, I'm coming to you because now I have a 43 and I'm about to fail. Plant 101. I know that's not a class, but if it was, it's another thing to say, hey, Dr. Rizzo, I'm in this class and I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed. I'm starting to get lost because the textbook is huge. I never had to write like this. What can I do? It's a very different conversation. And if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, the one way to take control of your life is by doing exactly what Dr. Andrews and Dr. Rizzo said. You have to advocate for yourself and come out before you're drowning. So those office hours are key. And again, if you guys already knew what office hours are, I just wanted to bring it up in case we have, and we have sixth graders possibly attend these things. So that's why I just wanted to bring it up. But great advice. And like you mentioned, student clubs. There's so many different student clubs on a campus about every single major, about certain cultural groups in a certain major. Like it's just amazing. If you were to just Google any college that you're thinking about and put student organizations or student clubs, you will see the laundry list of options. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Sorry, I just had a couple of comments. I came through quite a different system, so I can't really speak to the US college, but I wanted to echo, I was the first of my family to go to university. So it was a big change for me. And the advice you just gave, Nicole, about asking for help as soon as you need it, or asking questions as early as possible, was critical for me. I didn't do that very well in my first year. I learned a lot from it, but it is the best thing you can do to be successful.
Yeah, and I think, thank you for sharing that. And I too am a first generation college going, and I was not a strong college bound academic student, but thankfully I am a very strong advocate. So I learned every resource, and I was the first one there, signed up to get the office hours for math or the writing lab or any of those things. And students, it is a godsend, and those people are there to help you. They want to help you. They are all in these positions to support your success. So the only failure you can make is not taking advantage of help. That's the only way you fail, is not going for help. But yeah, you've got a lot of exciting stuff here. And just like this webinar, I mean, this is open to so many people. You have to invest the time to learn more. People aren't going to knock on your door and say, hey, are you okay? You need to go out there and seek it. So I'm proud of you for being here and having Dr. Andrews and Dr. Rizzo. I mean, their information is invaluable to try and pick at their brains, at these nuggets of knowledge about their craft and just career advice. I want to open it up and see what questions we have coming in already, or students, if you haven't submitted a question and you'd like to ask some questions, this is a perfect time.
Yes. Just to echo again what everyone had been saying, my first year in college, I also kind of like went out of my comfort zone, introduced myself to my professors the first week of school, because usually the first week or two office hours are pretty empty, you know, everyone just figuring stuff out. But it was from those initial interactions that I started building some relationships with professors. They offered me a couple like teaching assistant opportunities, or sometimes even if, you know, there's a particular interest area you have at your school that the professor, maybe your school doesn't offer. I had a couple professors, you know, offer some reading materials to me, or reach out to some colleagues at other schools who had some research that was more pertinent to what I wanted to learn a little bit more about. So it's amazing how quickly, you know, when you ask for help, some professors are really just willing to go above and beyond. And I had a really great college experience, I think, because of that, building relationships with professors. We have one question first and foremost that's not, maybe Dr. Andrews, you could speak a little bit more to this. There's a student who just wants to know a little bit more about geology. I was wondering, or Dr. Rizzo, if either of you have a little bit of experience with knowing a little bit more about what a geologist does, I think that would be cool.
I can certainly speak to that. So my undergraduate was everything. It was geology, geochemistry, geophysics, and paleontology. And I obviously work with a lot of geologists at the USGS now. So predominantly they do a lot of field work. So much more than us seismologists, who are sort of more, you know, driven by instrumental data. They're going to be out in the field carrying out surveys, very much like plant sciences, but staring at rocks, which also don't talk back to you. And and again, that could be around the world. So I have friends who work as geologists in sort of mining industry, oil industry, and they'll be out doing surveys or taking core samples and taking them back to the lab. So yeah, the geologists tend to be a lot more hands-on in their surveys.
Thank you.
I have a question for Dr. Rizzo. In terms of a plant pathologist, a plant doctor, what is the career demand for that? And what is the biggest threat going on right now in the world of plants?
Well, there is a lot of career demand, and it's at a whole bunch of, different levels, whether it's in private industry, through agriculture, working for government agencies, working in university. And, there's a huge demand from the standpoint of food security issues and food availability. I mean, many plant diseases don't necessarily infect people, but they infect the food that we eat. And this is particularly true in a number of countries around the world that are much more dependent on agriculture than we are. Big one in the United States now, California, is a disease of citrus called citrus greening. Those of you in Southern California may have heard about it. It has pretty much caused almost the complete destruction of the citrus industry in Florida. So Florida had been the #1 producer of citrus in the United States. California was #2. California is now #1, not because we grow more citrus and oranges and limes and lemons. It's because Florida, actually, most trees have died or the yield dropped off. So a lot of scientists in my department work on it. But you see this around the world. There's diseases of bananas. And bananas are a major staple crop, particularly in parts of sub-Saharan Africa. It's a big part of the economy that has a major impact there. So there are these diseases that have huge impacts. We also see certain types of microorganisms that contaminate food. For example, you may have seen over the last few years issues with romaine lettuce. And so with E. coli and other human pathogens. So we actually, as plant scientists, work with animal biologists and human people who work on human diseases, looking at these sorts of things. And there's a lot of interest in this area now called One Health, where in order to solve these really big problems, that we have to look at human, animal, plant, and environmental issues all at the same time, not just at really small scales. There's a lot of really interesting things going on in those different areas. I could talk for hours on this, but I'm not.
I think I never really even thought about when you talked about plants going into like the whole food industry. I mean, yeah. It's huge.
So
it's
food safety issues, and we see this in other parts of the world with contamination of grains and stuff, that long-term exposure to these lead to issues with liver cancer, for example. So there's scientists working on those areas. So we see this in rich countries. We see this in lower income countries as well. So there's lots of opportunities, much like Dr. Andrews said, around the world. There's a lot of issues, particularly as our population, the world population grows.
Fascinating. Dr. Andrews, my 8-year-old daughter wanted me to ask you when the next earthquake is coming. So.
Yeah, it's one we get a lot.
But of course, like, cool, ask her when it's coming. I'm like, I don't think it works like that, but she's the scientist, so I'll have to check.
So we record at the moment, it's somewhere between 40 and 100 earthquakes every day. Most of those, of course, aren't felt. When we haven't got a sequence ongoing, so, we're still obviously seeing aftershocks from the Ridgecrest sequence. So that's elevated the number that we're recording in Southern California at the moment. So we know that we have earthquakes all the time. I can say for certain we will have, earthquakes in the next few hours, but you won't be able to feel them. But we don't think we will ever be able to predict the big ones. And that's why we work with earthquake early warning, which is just very fast detection. and hopefully to reduce some of the impacts of it. But yes, and believe me, earthquake seismologists have tried everything to predict. They have done scientific studies on animals to see how, because there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that animals react before earthquakes. They have studied this. They've studied atmospherics, they've studied gases, they've studied electric and magnetic fields. We just don't think it's a predictable phenomenon.
Thank you. I'll tell her.
Gosh, that's so interesting. I love it. I think what's interesting about the work that both of you do is that, it really reaches it's not just in the United States, but, food and earthquakes happen all around the world. And so I think it's really interesting. I'm sure you work with other universities and, across the water, across the oceans. Something one student asked in particular, if either of you encountered any challenges while applying to college, and maybe you could speak about your own experiences, but maybe what are some current challenges you notice some students are facing in applying to college, the universities you're familiar with in the now times, in the present time. That was not super eloquent. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, that's a difficult question because there's always challenges there. There's a lot of students applying to different schools. I think one of the things is don't necessarily try to put all your eggs in one basket on things, and don't stress over, I have to get into a particular college or I'm not going to be successful. And I think that's something that a lot of students get really stressed out about. The college that I went to as an undergraduate, it would be the equivalent of going to California State University, CSU Northridge, something like that. I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I didn't go to something the equivalent of a UC, and I turned out okay. And so, I think going to a school that you can be successful at and working hard, you'll be successful going to anything. I have other professors in my department who started out as community college, and they didn't go again to a UCLA or a Berkeley right off the bat. They went to community college, they went to a CSU school, and they ended up moving on, getting PhDs and being incredibly successful. So I think that's something that I see with a lot of students stressing out that they have to get into the right university, the right college right off the bat. And that's not necessarily true. And so look for places that you're going to be successful at and you can make things work. It's not quite addressing a challenge, but I think it's something that I see students stressing out over a lot.
Yeah, and just to echo that, certainly in my field, we have people come in from a lot of unconventional routes. Funnily enough, a lot of our field technicians have come in from they have military background because they have a lot of those field and technical skills that they've picked up through different routes. So yeah, there's no need to focus on one particular route into science. And a lot of computer scientists who've fallen sideways into seismology and are also hugely valued. So there's no need to fix one path.
I think that's a great point y'all make, because especially when you get to the junior, senior year, people are freaked out about, I didn't get into my dream school. And I try and say, and we've heard this in other career convos, don't chase the school, chase the career. Because it's about getting to the career, not that I had to go to this school to get there. Because especially when it comes to the sciences, getting advanced degrees, maybe you didn't go there undergrad, or maybe you have to transfer there, or and even I'm sure there's some people that go to very prestigious schools that just may not have the passion or the independent thinking that you speak of when it comes to interviewing a candidate or wanting to select someone for your team. So yeah, all of you out there, work your hardest, but there are many paths to get to where you want to go, as long as you're willing to work. I think the one ingredient that is a non-negotiable is hard work, and being able to advocate and connect, right? I think those are the two things that are something you can't really just say, I'll pass this one step of the process.
Yes. I don't have a ton of questions coming in from the students. I don't know if Nicole, if you have any things you want to ask the presenters.
Yeah, I would like to ask, in terms of when it comes to your career experience, have you had, like, what are some of the biggest setbacks, or maybe one setback that was like a lesson learned? Maybe what are some of the greatest lessons you've learned through your experience?
Well, I think the one thing as a scientist, especially as you move on in your career, is you do have to get a thick skin, because, there are times you get rejected, and, that happens to be now, many years in my career. You write a scientific article, you submit it to a journal, it's not accepted. You write grant proposals, they're not accepted. So I think the key is to just keep a positive attitude and keep trying. But I think every scientist has had those sorts of setbacks as well. And certainly as an undergraduate, I had the occasional class that I didn't do particularly well in. I didn't have a perfect 4.0 coming out of my undergraduate. And I think you just have to learn from those experiences and continue to move on.
Yeah, certainly. I'm not strictly, as I say, in the academic field, but certainly learning to deal with the rejection of proposals and papers and your work can be a tough lesson to learn. But one of my biggest changes of job changes, and one of the things I think, that was hardest to deal with, was I was living and working in New Zealand, and it just so happened that they closed the institute that I was at. So suddenly, I'm British, so I'd moved to New Zealand. I have to look for a new home and a new position, and it's frightening. It's an uncertain time. But I ended up here, and so some things that can look at like big challenges or setbacks or things you weren't expecting can turn into positives. Yes, you may be changing direction, but that doesn't mean it's a step backwards. It's just a different a different step.
That's a great point, and I thank you for sharing that story. And I feel that our students, all of our students right now, with this pandemic and having to pivot from everything in person to online to just life in general, just being kind of thrown in the air and making it work, they've been so resilient and so strong with being able to pivot and still keep future focused, no matter how bad or uncomfortable things get. Not giving up and staying future focused, I think, is a key thing that you talked about, and that I thank you for sharing, and just want students, sometimes they don't realize how strong they are, but it's amazing. It's amazing the strength that they may not self-identify their strength, but when you look at the story that they have, it's just incredible. So they just have to continue that and bring it to college and beyond, because both of your fields are fascinating, and they're a thing like they may not have thought of. Sometimes we talk about a field with a student and they're like, that's a thing? That's like a real job? I'm like, yeah, it's a real job that we really need. So, I mean, seismologist and plant pathologist and plant doctor, when you just break it down simply like that, and then you realize the impact on, as Amy said, it's a global impact of your work. And it kind of just makes you say, wow, everything's kind of connected and really needed. So I thank you for your stories. Students, parents that are on right now, is there anything else? We have our experts here. They've talked about what they do. They've talked about skills that we would need, or that you would need if you're interested in going into a career in sciences. someone brought up a type of science that was interesting to them that varied from what Dr. Rizzo and Dr. Andrews spoke of. Is there any other question you might have? You could speak up or type it in the chat.
Just in the pause while people are typing, I did want to say that one of the great things that I see at Caltech is the students who are trying different summer school experiences or classes outside of their major that they're taking just to explore some of these sort of more niche areas. They might be computer science or physics majors, but they see, oh, there's a field course on the San Andreas, and they get exposed to a little bit of geology. So once this whole idea of just exploring things once you've started, look around for different opportunities, and the clubs as well. But they will be there for you to explore.
Thank you, Dr. Andrews. And one thing I like to point out to the students, if you are at a PUC high school, all of our schools, our 5 high schools in the Valley and in LA have early college programs. So you can take free college classes. As long as you're passing your classes, your regular high school classes, you have the opportunity to go see your school and college counselor and say, you know what, I want to try that geology class. I want to try that whatever class it might be, and take that during the summer, during the winter, during the semester. You just have to ask and then be committed to actually doing the work. But what a great opportunity to earn college credit for free before you even choose a major. With that being said, I'm looking at the time. We've got like 2 minutes to go. I'd like to say thank you so much, presenters. After your long day of work and life, you still made time for PUC school students, and I greatly appreciate you. And thank you from all of PUC schools.
Oh, my pleasure.
Excellent.
Students can always feel free to email me too. My email is on the UC Davis website. I'm always happy to answer questions from students.
Yeah,
thank you.
Same here. Any follow-up questions, feel free, and just encourage the students to dream big. Yeah.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate you. Oh, I heard one pro tip. I was wondering if you guys could confirm or deny. A lot of college students, when you're doing research and you come up and you can just read the abstract to someone's research, and you have to pay to read the rest of it or something. Is it true that if they emailed you, you might just send them a copy of your research article to read for free?
Yes.
Yep.
And the other thing to look at is many journals now are what's known as open access, and that they're free to everybody. And I think that's a really key thing for certain journals to look for that, those kind of things. But I'm always happy to send out copies of various research articles.
That's good to know. I was guilty once or twice of trying to fiddle my way through a research paper just on abstract.
If I sent you a picture of my avocado plant, would you help me? No, okay.
I get lots of those. Believe me.
What am I doing? I just put the seed in. How could it be dying?
I also get lots of mushroom identification emails too.
Oh my goodness. That's so funny.
I get both of those.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much. I'm going to just stay on the call if any other questions come in for students. Amy, have you posted the survey?
Yeah, I put it in at 5:51. I'll just post it again, keep it fresh.
Thank you. Thank you. And Dr. Andrews and Dr. Rizzo, again, thank you so much for being here today. Very cool work. Thanks for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Good luck to all the students.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I hope you enjoyed it. I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for completing the survey.
Mm.
I want to TV.